Hey, hey, I'm Bradley Charbonneau, Uncle Jay. Thursday Thunder, Repossible podcast. Today's episode, Uncle Jay. It's just a story. If you want to hear a story, grab some popcorn, coffee, tea, chai, and come on and listen in. It's going to be less than 10 minutes. I don't know how many minutes. Depends on how much I can remember. He died when I was younger, but I remember him because here's a little improv trick. I remember him because there were specific details. For example, he he would put his finger. I can't remember which finger. He'd put his finger in his nose like this, right? I'm like four, and then he'd go like, oh, help me get my finger out of my nose. My finger's stuck in my nose. My finger's pull, and the little kid's like, oh no, and we pull, and we pull it, and then this is like terrible and terribly funny at the same time. He actually had like an amputated finger. I can't remember how it happened, but he had an amputated finger. So, he'd pull it out and then there'd be this amputated finger. And you're like this 4-year-old kid. You're like traumatized for life. You're like, it's in his nose. I mean, I look back and I'm laughing. I'm not sure I was really laughing at four. I'm probably like PTSD forever. But that's the kind of crazy guy he was. I remember being in his house. He was from Estes Park, Colorado. And here's a fun story about history. And you might like this because it's very like traditional. Hey, Pep, very traditional. So his father, this is my great uncle, right? So it's like he was a brother of my grandfather. And my grandfather's father was from Germany. And I think my grandfather's father like only spoke German. I think they went to like Oklahoma or Kansas. I think it was Oklahoma. And they only spoke German. Like when I was a kid, I'd sit on their knees and they'd sing this song. And I was in Spain a couple of weeks ago and I met some German friends and I told them this thing. It was like a hip a kylie, a thin hit to highly, a hit to over the hood, a hit to hood. And they're like, oh, I know what that song is. And I wrote it down. If I remember and if I forget, comment and I will put that song in here. So that's the kind of stuff, the little memories I have from when I was a tiny little kid. And I've got these sort of German roots and these crazy uncles, right? I got a crazy uncle. My grandfather, I really didn't know. I remember more about my great uncle Jay. Okay, we got the finger in the nose. I do another thing I remember. We were in his house once in Estes Park, Colorado, and he sometimes he was in Palm Springs and Estes Park. And oh, I forgot the part about the traditional thing. His father or his parents, they had three boys, and the three boys, when you finished whatever schooling, they said, okay, you can have a farm or you can have education. Kind of cool, right? It was like so clear. And one boy chose farm and two boys chose education. And my grandfather and my great uncle, I don't know the other guy, I don't know the guy who chose the farm. My grandfather and my great uncle, they chose education and they both became doctors. I mean, and in fact, my great uncle Jay, he went to China. I mean, like way back when, like before it was like hip to go to China, right? He went to China to do his medicine. So his work. All right. We're in his house in Estes Park, Colorado, and he's not there very much because he lives in Palm Springs and Estes Park. And I remember I found a box of, I don't know, rice or mac and cheese or something, and it had like an expiration date that was like years. Like it might have been a decade. It was like years. And I open it, and there's like little mealy worms in it. I'm like, oh, heck. A little audio discombobulation there. Okay, but there's one story I really want to tell you. And this is so remember, he's in Estes Park, Colorado, really tiny little town. And he would drive his like I think he had like a big old Cadillac, big old thing. That's what I remember anyway. It might be different. And he's driving down the road and he would drive in his older age he would drive so slowly that caused traffic. And there's one time there's like a 2-lane road and he stops on the road and he sees his friend or something and he just stops in the middle of the 2-lane road and rolls down the window and he's talking to his friend. And now it's fine if they can get around or there's more lanes on the road, but no, they're both blocking traffic because they're just having a conversation. And he's like, this is all okay. That's just silly things I remember. So another time when he's driving too slowly. Hello, grammarian. And he gets pulled over by the cops. And they say, now, Dr. Mall, you were, I think he's weaving or driving too slow, or he's like, license and registration, please. And hands over his papers. And then they say, Dr. Mall, I can't remember if they knew him or not. I mean, it's such a small town, right? He says, we need to do a breathalyzer. We need to check your alcohol levels. And he says, I kid you not, he's like, I wish you would, because those margaritas at the bar, I think they were really watered down. And I would like you to tell me how much alcohol I have in my blood, because if it's not high enough, I'm going to go back there and complain. Can you imagine the police officers? They're just like, oh, who is this guy, right? And again, maybe they knew him, so maybe they're used to this stuff, right? So they're like, okay, Dr. Mom, okay, fine. Uh, skip the breathalyzer, but he says, all right, we need you to step out of the car, and you need to walk that straight line right there. And Dr. Mall says, that line, he says, I couldn't walk that line straight if I were sober. So the policemen at this point, they're just like, what in the world? What are we going to do? And finally, they just like, they're giving in. They're like, Dr. Mall, we're going to escort you home. Get back in the car. We're going to give you a police escort. It's time to go home. You need to go home. He would wear like sombrero, like, a 10-gallon cowboy hat. He'd wear like a 20-gallon hat to pick you up at the airport. That whole side of the family is really into costumes. I remember him always decked out. He had one of those, I think it's called a bolo tie. He was kind of from Midwest, and he was such a funny guy. And if you asked him how he's doing, he'd say stuff like, never better. And he's at the end of his life, and he'd just be still telling stories, and he's still positive, and didn't complain about his health. And he got the finger, pull it out of his nose, freak out kids their entire lives traumatized, or laughing about it, hopefully. That's Uncle Jay. That's my Thursday Thunder for you. I'm Bradley Charbonneau. I'm here every week raising the energy. That's what I'm doing. I'm telling stories. I'm talking about I'm talking about energy a lot. It's a lot about energy because I want to raise it. I raise mine on a weekly basis just by giving this. I hope it raises your energy by receiving it. And I also encourage you to create your own energy. That's where I believe the true energy, the powerful, the core, the pure, the real energy comes from creating. Go subscribe, and we'll catch up with this kind of stuff every week. This was Uncle Jay. Thanks for watching. Bye. You want a bet?